Hey guys, thanks so much for joining another episode of the CX Chronicles Podcast. Super excited today, guys. We have the founder of IrisAgent. Palak, why don't you say hello to the CX Nation for us?
Hi, CX Nation. Great to be here. Thanks, Adrian, for having me here.
No, we're pumped to have you. So, guys, Palak and I were talking last week. It's just she's in a super cool space. Just like all of us, she's thinking about customers every single day. She's thinking about building her team every single day. And she's thinking about how technology can help with all this. And she's got a super cool company, IrisAgent, that she's going to walk us through today. Palak, before we get into the four pillars, I'd love for you to just set the stage for some of our listeners. Give us the couple minute idea of how you got started and how you got into this space, what drew you to this whole world, and certainly what started to spawn some of the initial ideas and some of the initial blueprints that made you go out and want to build an awesome company like IrisAgent.
Yeah, absolutely. So I had a very interesting journey wearing multiple hats. Along the way, I began my career as an engineer at Microsoft, working on their search engine team. Did my MBA after that and jumped into product management at Google, where I was working on Kubernetes and DevOps workflows, using the latest technologies to help engineering teams, improve the release velocity, launch features faster. And as a product manager, I also noticed, customer support teams kind of live in a completely different world, and all
Yes,
the
they do. They definitely
all
do.
the advancements that are happening on the engineering and product sides, they are great for customers, but can create some challenges for support teams, especially being in the know-how of the latest changes. So yeah, that's where kind of saw those issues and wanted to solve it myself as well. Having been an engineer as well as a product manager, I saw how the fast advances in support in the product and engineering domains can really augment the capabilities of the product, but create some challenges for customer support teams that I wanted to resolve. And that's where we began the company a couple of years back. Began right at the same time the pandemic hit. So it was an interesting transition, but yeah, it's been an exciting journey so far, and glad to be working on this.
That's awesome. So number one, I think super cool background. I think we've had a few folks that had the pleasure of working at a company like Google. I have to imagine that some of your time spent there, you must have seen number one, a number of just interesting challenges that companies and that modern consumers were just thinking about facing. Obviously, Google solves a lot of different unique problems. But number two, you must have seen some really interesting up close types of views for how one of the most successful companies on planet Earth thinks about their team and their tools and their process and their feedback. So it must have been a really interesting way to kind of set the stage. Were you already thinking about how this whole data and customer insights and just general way of kind of helping companies see what their customers were thinking? Were you already thinking about it all the way back then? Or was this, I have to imagine, was something that was in front of you guys every single day there?
Yeah, great question. And I was very fortunate to work with some of the amazing minds at Google and learn the fundamentals of product management. And the core part of product management is the customer,
Yep.
Really understanding their needs and requirements in building products and championing the resources across the organization to serve the customer the most, and having all those tools, processes, and systems in place that help deliver that. And one of the key aspects of that is today in the SaaS-oriented world, there are so many data silos, information is siloed in different places, and it's very difficult to bring all the context together because of this limitation of different systems and serve the customer in the best possible way. So I think just fortunate to learn all those fundamentals about serving customers, building great products, which really helped me in my journey right now as a founder and CEO of building something from scratch and creating value for our customers.
That's super cool, and it's an awesome way to definitely become battle tested, plus meet a bunch of awesome smart people and just see how you can approach problems, how you can come up with different solutions, and then more importantly, how you can bring some of those solutions to a given market, right? Because all of us have different types of ICPs or ideal customer profiles that we gravitate towards, and that must have been a really interesting way. The other thing I want to call it real quick before we jump to the pillars, you mentioned you guys started right as the pandemic started. So okay, it's funny because we've had several guests on the show that are in the same position. We're in this position. CXC, frankly, we got started right at the height of the pandemic. People thought we were absolutely crazy for starting a business during the pandemic. But what was your experience like
Yeah.
getting the company, getting IrisAgent started at that point?
Yeah.
Was it really difficult? Did you find that there were some unique advantages to starting at that
Yeah.
time? What did that look like?
Yeah, actually it ended up being a blessing in disguise, especially
Thanks.
when you're starting a company. You need a lot of focused time to think about the product journeys, build the product, talk to customers, potential customers. So it gave us a lot of time to just reflect, introspect, and really dig deeper into what we want to build, establish the use cases and the assumptions that we have in the process. It wasn't a phase of doing a lot of sales and marketing. It was just a phase of focused product development and figuring out the journey from there. The other advantage, obviously, was pandemic. Started this whole notion of working from home. So we have been remote first from day one, and
Nice.
we have employees from multiple countries, and we get access to that amazing talent pool. And then being remote also forces you to establish some processes in the company around having great written communication, establishing asynchronous and
Yep.
synchronous
Yep.
ways to collaborate. And that sort of discipline also lets us makes us think critically about what we are seeing, how we are making decisions. But now with things coming, hopefully improving, we're also trying to evaluate other ways of some sort of a hybrid setup where people can also meet in person and brainstorm and whiteboard.
I think it's going to be so cool to look back on this period, maybe say 10 years from now, and look at like a
Yeah.
cohort of companies that are similar to us, where you started literally during the height of the first pandemic, major global pandemic that we had in so many years. But I think what you just said, Palak, is so true. It's like companies have been flexible, they've adapted. One could argue they left the world of where a traditional entrepreneur, they think about finding their team in where they are, right? Whether you're in San Francisco or New York City, you try to find your team locally, and you think about a very geo fence type of view. And now all these different successful startup founders and business executives are realizing, wait a minute, now I can go literally get awesome, smart, experienced, fantastic people everywhere, like across the planet. And it's really interesting because it's just like, what an easy way to make any team and any company and any product offering that much more diverse, that much deeper, wider. So super cool. I love it. With that being said, let's jump into that first CX pillar of team. I'd love for you to spend a couple minutes kind of giving us a sense for the team that you've been able to build, some of the different roles that you guys have really kind of thought about as you've been building IrisAgent, and give us a sense for how the team is comprised today.
Yeah, definitely. And just to provide some context as to what are the requirements and what we are building as a company, and that was basically what influenced the kind of decisions we made on how we build a team. So what we do is we build a proactive customer support solution, which has AI-powered alerting, triaging, and correlation of customer support tickets to product and engineering issues. So we're bringing all of this data and systems together to the service of customers and resolving issues faster and improving performance internally. So with that in mind, we wanted to, build a team which, one, is very strong in AI and machine learning. 80% of technology is actually, figuring out intent and insights from unstructured data, be email, text, phone conversations, and so on, and building those correlations, as well as thinking about, how do we do product management, how do we do sales and go to marketing. Building a team which has skills in those domains, as well as diverse perspective, having a global team. And also, I think focusing a lot on people with some startup experience, because they have built systems from end to end, from ground up. So that has also helped me reach here. And I think in terms of when it comes to team and the way that we think about helping our customers also improve the collaboration between team. It's a very simple statement that it says that teams need to work together to really perform best. It seems pretty obvious, but we hear so many stories where it does not happen. There might be a bug in engineering which might be causing 10 different support tickets, which 10 different support agents are working independently on, especially now in the remote world where there might not be a lot of communication. And it becomes very difficult to really evangelize all of these sources to get to the true source of issues and resolve them faster.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's like, number one, I know that now at this point, 2.5, almost 3 years into it, most companies have figured out whatever their new normal is, right? But you're absolutely right, Palak, which is like the one thing that I think most companies continue to struggle with, communication continues to be an issue because you don't have many companies are moving, whether they're remote, whether they're hybrid, or whether they've already completely brought everyone back into person. And those are kind of the three camps that are out there. But I would argue every company is continuing to kind of have that ongoing challenge of, is our communication really sound? Is it tight? Do people understand what's north, what's south? And then the second piece is, you mentioned this a little bit earlier, but the asynchronous piece. There's some wildly successful, wildly profitable, on their way to being unicorn companies out there that are terrible with building asynchronous work, so that folks, because when I hear you say that, like, even with the IrisAgent team, you got people across the world. People don't have the same time zones. People that are, some of our friends that work across the pond, they've already finished their workday, right? And we're just getting into ours. And this idea of building an asynchronous workplace, or this idea of building, almost thinking about everything that you do with across your team, across your tools, across your process management, and even the way that you think about customer and employee feedback, you've got to be building with having some of those asynchronous fibers entangled into everything, because folks are going to sit down at their computer at different times. They're going to be on their workstations at different times. Some people are just creative at different times, and they can actually collaborate at a higher level at different hours. So, like, love that idea. And I think there's one thought that I keep thinking about. It's going to be really cool and interesting to see how companies think about building that same type of asynchronous thought for their customers too. Because I think customers, we talk about this, everyone talks about this a lot, but Amazon has changed the way that so many of us have really come to expect things, right? We want them now. We want to be able to literally be able to filter between what can we get today versus what can we get tomorrow versus what can we get in 48 hours. And then we're just used to, if anything does break down in that experience, we return it. We get the money back right away. Maybe we get a credit. So it's almost like they've just pushed the bar up so high for the rest of us. But I think it's really cool that you guys are already kind of thinking about some of that as you're building the team. Before we move off this one quick question for you. When you were starting the team, when you're starting IrisAgent, what was the one or two areas that you knew you needed to make your first investment, or you needed to bring in your first employees or your first teammates that were going to focus? What were like the two areas that you knew you needed help with?
Yeah, great question. I think one was engineering. I think we definitely needed to build something to have something tangible that we can show to potential customers and investors and so on, and get that traction in. So having, I think, especially for software products in the SaaS world, where customer experience and user experience are so important, it's super important to have a system which is scalable, production ready, and really meet the needs of the customers. The bar for excellence when it comes to products and user experience has really gone up in a SaaS world where customers can just churn away with just a click, and there's there are no multi-year contracts that was that common. So one was definitely having a rock star engineering team, and secondly, I would say as we are starting to scale, really thinking about go-to-market. What can we say which is unique in the industry when it comes to customer support and experience? There's a lot of material out there, a lot of noise in the space, and really thinking about how we view our values and our products and how we see them adding value to the industry, and telling our story. In today's world, which is getting more and more online, it's important to have your story and make it exciting for not just potential customers, but people who want to join you or invest in you.
I love that, Paul, because you're, especially in the SaaS world or any type of technology or any type of tech heavy service-based offerings, the world has got so much software and so much technology. There's a solution, there's 100 tech solutions for every little problem. And that's great. That's good. I love living in that world. Most of our listeners love living in that world. We live in one of the greatest times, to be a human. But on the flip side of that, you just now that there's so many companies out there that are understanding and investing. So just not just talking the talk, but they're walking the walk, investing in customer success and customer experience, because as great as your product or as great as your piece of technology is, people still do business with people that they like, and they still do business with brands that they like. And if you have rock star customer success or folks that are working on your go-to-market or working on your customer facing teams, these are going to be the guys and the gals that build relationships, learn more about your customers, understand what your product can do, what it can't do, what it should do, what it won't do. And the better and the faster you can kind of build that type of feedback cycle inside of your business, the faster you're gonna grow, and the faster you're gonna find new customers and bring on new logos. So I love that. Palak, I'd love to dive into the second CX pillar of tools. Spend a couple minutes talking about your tool, talking about IrisAgent, talking about some of the things that you're doing with your customers, and then I'd love to kind of pick your brain on what were some of the tools that you and your team needed to invest in and needed to build IrisAgent and to scale the business?
Yeah, absolutely. Tools is a central piece of our CX journey because we sit centrally between all the different systems that different functions use. So we have 10 plus key integrations between engineering, DevOps, customer support, success, and product management systems,
Okay.
enabling customers and employees to stay connected and informed. And it's not just connections; we're also building automated data workflows between these systems. To
Nice.
give an example, if a customer is up for renewal, and there have been tickets coming in for that customer, the support team needs to know that information,
Yeah.
especially as well as if there's a bug which is impacting the same customer. The engineering team also needs to know that this is a high priority customer, and they might need to prioritize the bugs and the issues that they're working on based on the business impact, as
Yeah.
opposed to the loudest voice getting the most attention.
Yep.
Yeah, so we have these widgets and alerts which connect all these systems together, and trying to go into the product led growth more where you don't really need to think about customer support and CX in a very reactive way, where we wait for customers to file support tickets. Today, with all the data and information which is present in all these systems and silos, we can actually predict what issues are impacting customers the
Yep.
most, who are the impacted customers, how much business and revenue is right now being impacted, and take proactive actions as opposed to waiting for customers to report issues. So that has been a central pillar of our strategy. Yeah, and then internally as well, we use some pretty great tools that help us, stay focused and disciplined. We use for communication, we use Slack, which has also helped a lot with asynchronous communication, like you were
Totally.
talking
Yep.
about.
Yep.
Yeah, we use project management and product management tools like
Okay.
Jira and others, which let us plan roadmaps, as well as we're actually leveraging Slack for a lot of our customer support
Nice.
experience as well, because it's more real time. Customers feel that they get a personalized touch, and we can really do a back and forth very easily with customers, just like we do it internally within our teams. We can also, they're like an extended team for us, which is helping us, it's a pretty good relationship where we are helping them, address any concerns they have, but also the insights and the feedback that they're sharing us with us is helping a lot and influencing our roadmap.
That's super cool. So I think a few different things here. Number one, just with IrisAgent and with the tool that you and the team have built, again, companies struggle sometimes to, number one, just even understand the difference between leading indicators and lagging indicators. And even really smart people sometimes struggle with this, which is like just being able to mathematically define what's happening before the event and after the event. Yeah. Once a company starts growing and there's a ton of customers on board and there's a ton of team members, that can get even harder to manage just because it's more complex and there's more things going on. But you just nailed it, where like modern portfolio management, modern customer portfolio management, and modern customer success optimization, that's how you get there, Palak. It's like being able to help understand and visualize the actions or the activities or the flags or the indicators that happen before an event, that like signals, and then certainly after the event. And then more importantly, the way that you talked about tying that back to your overall financial performance and your business performance, or your portfolio health or your portfolio performance. This is going to be the stuff that like every company in the world is going to have to be thinking about this stuff moving forward. Even small companies. This is the funny part too. There's a bunch of awesome startup growth focused companies that we work at the CXC, and you can start this stuff when you've got your first 10 customers. You can start this stuff when you've got your first 50 customers, your first 100. But you better have it by the time you get into your hundreds of customers, because that's literally how you understand how to define what needs to be on the strategic roadmap, how to define and prioritize what your OKR sets are going to look like on the product side, on the sales side, on the success side. And then lastly, one last part that I don't think I want our listeners to think about, because I just don't know if people think about it this way. If you can get good at that stuff, that also helps to amplify your EX, because people like to kind of see where the ship is going. Like everyone who was on an airplane, we like to kind of pop into that screen where you can literally see where your airplane is over the. That's like your employees. Like your employees need to have a basic understanding of what direction the ship is going in. And I think that some of that stuff that you called out there, Palak, that's like mapping too. You're literally showing your team where to go. You're showing your customers where you're going to go. And you're showing that you understand the things that are really going to impact an excellent experience versus a subpar experience. That's really, really helpful stuff right there. Palak, let's dive into the 36 pillar of process. As you built the business, as you built the team, and you've been able to work at a bunch of really cool companies before starting IrisAgent, how did you guys kind of tackle the evolution of your playbooks, your standard operating procedures? How did you guys kind of wrangle process as you've grown the business and as you built out your customer portfolio?
Yeah, definitely. I think when it comes to process, it's very important to have a workflow where we can document our past learnings and learn from them, as opposed to making the same mistakes again and again. And especially because we began as a remote first organization in a distributed world, we had to document and learn those experiences. So what we definitely encourage our team members to do is nothing very fancy or very elongated, but just write some short summary documents, and we maintain that in our repository. And we also use intelligent search to search across those articles for ourselves and also for our customers, where we can go back to them. And especially when a new employee is joining in a completely remote office, they're completely, feeling a little bit isolated. They don't know how to tackle all those blockers that do keep coming across. So having a quick access to that knowledge repository helps a lot in removing those roadblocks and making sure that our processes are all aligned. And then I think having clear processes also ensure that different functions know how they interact well with each other, as well as what the roles and responsibilities are, how we improve our processes as we scale. We also extend that to our customers and customer support and success teams, where we use AI quite a lot to understand what the previous processes were, how common issues have been resolved in the past, using search and recommendations to bring those insights to the forefront, so that we can resolve issues faster. And also thinking about escalation management process, which has been a little bit inefficient when it comes to escalating tickets from support to engineering. It often happens as a one-off way, and there are duplicate and redundant escalations that go out just because of lack of information and silos between support and engineering. So we focus a lot on that escalation management process, which is first identifying what is going on, who are the owners of this issue, who are both on the engineering side, on the support side, on CSM side, and then figuring out what is the impact of it, who are the customers who are impacted, what is the revenue which is impacted, and then building out processes slowly and gradually on how we deal with incidents, and what is our operating procedure, what sort of root cause analysis we do, how do we communicate with customers at different stages of an incident so that they feel that they are looped in the journey, and they feel that they're heard when they bring out an issue, and even when they don't bring out an issue, when they're still being impacted.
I love that. I think it's a couple of things. Number one, you mentioned just even having the team starting with just writing stuff down, get it documented, get it onto paper, get it up into the cloud. By the way, I have one quick question. Is there a specific tool that you guys use to do some of your internal process creation, or is it simply Google? Is it a Confluence system? Is it a LMS? What do you guys use?
We use Google. Coming from Google, I have a sweet spot for that. So we use G Suite pretty extensively. I think it's called Workspace now.
Nice,
So documents, Excel sheets, and also linking that into Slack, and small actions of pinning conversations. Right now, exploring some other tools like Guru and Notion as well, where we can document linking between different resources so that people can jump easily between those resources.
That's okay. So awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Google, literally, you can build a multi-million-dollar business right on Google, and it's free G Suite and Workspace. But number two, I was going to say, Paul, you give the listeners such a good idea here, which is, guys, like, regardless of where this content or where this information or the both the incident-based notes and then just the general summary notes that you kind of position for us, Paul, you start that stuff in a GDoc, and you start that stuff by just having some of your SMEs or some of the folks that own sales or own marketing or own success or own product, just starting to put this in one area. And what's funny is the gain, especially in a growth focused startup where you're like flying and things are changing every day and there's new people coming on every month and there's different people coming and going and all that fun stuff. It becomes the chronicle. It becomes the place where you are chronicling and you're documenting not just like the history and not just like the important stuff of what's going on, but when you chronicle the bad stuff too, or you chronicle areas where it's like, hey, don't go there. Like if you detect that you're going into the space, alarm should be going off, right? Like you get an executive sponsor involved or let us know. But like that is such an easy place to start. I think for some of our listeners that are running bigger, larger, more mature CX and CS teams, you guys are probably already way far ahead of leveraging and populating a Confluence knowledge base where you've already built all of these FAQs or knowledge base items into your CRM, or maybe you've built them into your issue resolution management system. And that's the other funny thing too, is most of these leading softwares today, they're literally building spaces and places for us to be able to build this stuff directly into the tool. So then you can mitigate some of that context switching. Last thing though, that you just made me think of, the incident reporting. I love that. There's a few of the startups that I helped build in New York, Palak, we would do the same thing, because if you can get really good at just stopping and pausing when shit does hit the fan and you have a big hairy problem with the customer, you have a big hairy internal problem with your product or with your actual solution, incident reports force people to come around the table, unpack it, ask like the 5 whys. You just said root cause analysis, go even deeper into why this happened. But those incident reports also just become such a great way of sort of documenting and flagging what you're not going to do again, or what you have to avoid, or what you're going to eventually teach a team of people to be able to sort of navigate around. And again, I think even sometimes people don't realize that, like, that type of thing, it's an easy way to mature your CX and your CS team. And it's a really great way too, that once a month, maybe once a quarter, maybe even just once a year, let's say that you stack up 10, 15, 50, 100, 1,000 incident reports, then you can start to do some fun stuff with actually compartmentalizing them. What's the breakdown? What was the leading indicators? What were the leading stakeholders that were constantly involved in this? What was the technology breakdown? It just shows you such a different picture of what you need to be thinking about as you move into the next quarter or the next month or the next customer. So all awesome ideas there, Palak. Palak, I'd love to dive into the fourth and final CX pillar of feedback. Can you spend a couple minutes talking about how you and the team at IrisAgent has kind of gone about collecting and acting on your customer feedback? And then I'd love for you to spend a few minutes talking about how you leverage your team and your employee-based feedback as well.
Yeah, definitely. Feedback is a very important pillar. We really don't know how well we are doing unless we get those metrics and feedback from who we are serving. So we focus a lot on real-time feedback, which means, the messages and tickets and other such communications that we get from our external customers. Not just relying on, surveys which might have a low response rate. Of course, that is still important data that goes into it, but also in real time, with advances in AIs, we can do, sentiment analysis to know, which customers might be really unhappy with the service and the sentiment might be dropping. So I think that is a very important point. And the second is there's a lot of valuable feedback in how customers are using your product. So how is their engagement and activity like? Do a lot of your users drop off at a certain feature? Maybe there's a issue with how that feature is configured and maybe it's not that easy to use. What is the 80-20 rule? Which 20% of your features drive 80% of your value? So instead of having a very long roadmap with lots of features in it, maybe it's better to focus on those important features and make them really good. So looking at customer sentiment in their communications, looking at product analytics feedback, and looking at what issues are they actually bringing up, how many bugs are we getting reported or that we're internally discovering, and what is the impact of those issues and bugs. And we track all those metrics to see overall, are we doing well? And I think feedback also ties into employee feedback, which you also brought up a little bit earlier, where employees also feel good when they notice improvement in those metrics with customers. They feel that they're part of a journey, they're having an impact, as opposed to working in the dark without having any sort of feedback or mechanism to know how their actions actually impacting customers.
Yeah, it's so true. It's like, it's some of this stuff just when you can democratize some of the feedback, whether it's your customer feedback or your employee feedback, and you begin to paint a really clear picture. And obviously every business is different. So even, by the way, I was going to say, that's not even fair. Some, even just starting and painting a blurry picture, at least a human can look at it and they can make their own interpretations of how things are going, right? Or what's happening. Obviously, as your business matures and as your team evolves, it'll get tighter and more crystal clear, more color will be added to it. But it's just one of these things of like showing and sharing what the customers are saying, or what the customers want more of, or what the customers want less of. But more importantly, I love that with the employee part, you're right, asking the employees too, because honestly, when you talk about 80/20, employees already know 80/20 before you even go pull 100 customers. Like take whoever the guys and the gals are that are speaking to or engaged with your customers or your product more than anyone else in the business, for specifically on the front line. Those folks already know the 80/20. They already know the 5 things that happen every damn day, that if you could fix them tomorrow, it would mitigate those 5. Obviously, it's going to create a new 5. There's always going to be the next couple of things that come up, and that's the fun of business, and that's obviously the fun of our game here in the CX and the CS land, is unearthing that stuff and working with our comrades to figure it out. But I think this is just an area where I think modern companies are going to have to be really, really good at this, Palak. And I think that companies that don't pay much attention to it, or companies that aren't going to invest in really kind of understanding and measuring and managing their CX efforts and their EX efforts, I think they're going to struggle. And I think we've already seen over the last 2+ years, the world is seeing the greatest talent migration it's ever had, right? Everyone calls it the Great Resignation. I think it's just it's a talent migration. A great, phenomenal A+ players are moving to companies, and they're moving to leadership teams that are going to invest in the things that we're talking about right now, and they're going to take it seriously, and they're going to take this stuff as meaningful, actionable things that can push a business ahead. And that's going to be fun. Those are going to be the fun places to work for most people. But Palak, this is fantastic. Before we wrap up, though, I want to make sure, is there anything that you or the team is doing that you want the listeners to know about? Any upcoming events, any upcoming webinars, any things that you and the team are working on that you'd like to share with the CX Nation?
Yeah, definitely. We have some exciting new things coming up on the roadmap. One is being able to use AI to resolve common questions which come up from customers, leveraging AI to get the sentiment of support tickets, other interactions across different channels, and also bringing with the theme of bringing siloed data together to serve the customers better, bringing in signals from not just your bug tracking systems, but your product analytics tools to know how the customers are using, where are they struggling, are any of those indicators impacting their overall business and retention with your organization. And then besides that, we are planning to do some webinars. Please do check out our website, IrisAgent.com. I will be posting upcoming updates over there. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, look, this has been an absolute pleasure. You guys are doing some awesome work over there. And not only that, I'm not just saying this because selfishly I think about this stuff all day, but you guys are in an incredible space. There's going to be some huge enterprise companies and mid-market companies that are going to need your guys' help with this. And more importantly, there's a ton of tomorrow's leading companies. There's a bunch of awesome customer-focused business leaders listening right now that are going to build tomorrow's leading mid-market or leading enterprise customer or business. And they're going to need to think about some of this stuff. They're going to need to think about how to leverage AI. They're going to need to think about how to leverage their support, their success, how to support it, how to provide that 360 view that all of us strive for, but not all of us actually have it, right? We talk about wanting to have that 360 customer view and that 360 employee view, but you guys are building it, and you're building an awesome solution to help companies really kind of get there and achieve that. So that's awesome. So Palak, this has been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. I look forward to keeping our conversation moving forward offline, and best of luck to you and the team at IrisAgent moving forward.
Thanks a lot, Adrian. It's been great talking to you, and thanks so much for having me here. Talk to you soon.